nice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life.
Hey, welcome to Dungeon Master None.
I'm Dungeon Master Rob.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt, and with us today we have one of our favorite people in the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game space, VJ Harris, designer, podcaster, professional DM. VJ, welcome to the show.
Hey, y'all.
Welcome.
Super excited to be here. So excited.
Thank you for coming on. You are, like Matt said, you're a game designer and a professional DM, a perfect guest for this podcast. And we have a lot to talk about, but first and foremost, you have something new and exciting that you've come up with. Do you want to tell us about it? We'll circle back to dig into it deeper after we discuss some current events. But to tell us about your thing, your beautiful thing.
Yeah, so out this past week on the DM's Guild is an Elf and an Orc Had Little Baby Volume 3. And it's myself and another designer, Adam Hancock's love child. As the Volume 3 says, we've done this 3 times, and pretty much it just replaces the race section in the player's handbook and gives a lot of more options for players, allowing you to make mixed characters, like a variety of sorts across all the official races, and then a bunch of monsters and stuff.
Yeah, throw out chapter 2 of your player's handbook. I have had a lot of fun with this. It's useful as for Dungeon Masters too, as we'll get into. I'm super excited this is out. Check it out on the DM's Guild, link in the show notes. Before we get into all that, we've assembled this crack team of business reporters. Sadly, this is an audio-only podcast because you can't see that behind me I have a stuffed bear, a bunch of sound effect buttons because we're entering the Jim Cramer zone. It's Mad Money time because
it's time to buy or sell.
Hasbro has been upgraded from sell to don't buy. No, it's on a recent investor call, Dungeons & Dragons executives Hasbro have talked about how the brand is really under-monetized. I don't know if y'all want me to read you a couple quotes from.
I'm sorry, I want to make a joke about it, but it's just
yeah.
Truly a terrible thing to hear come out of the word, the mouth of anyone, much less somebody who. It's a games company. I don't know. It just makes my skin crawl.
Especially given how expensive the hardcover books are, under
Well, that's actually a great
I just
point.
paid $50
Yeah.
for Dragonlight's book.
One of the things that came out of that call was that, and this is their own numbers, that DMs are 20% of their player base, but the majority of their the purchase the most of their books. And I guess I suppose there's actually more DMs than I thought, and it's not super surprising, but they're aware of that, and their solution is not. I guess this makes sense from a business perspective, but their solution is get everyone else to buy more shit, not do anything to improve their things for their biggest customers. It's typical capitalism brain, but it's you really it's.
I guess my because I read that article in preparation for this. I was but I guess part of me was I have mixed feelings about what they're moving to, but I'm also what would they have done to get players more into it in the first place? Are you going to start doing how in some video games they have you can buy in-game purchases and stuff, only allowing classes when you do it like that, or my other part of my brain was they're not going to do this, but there are a couple of pretty good DM's Guild products that are hey, you don't need a DM to run this. It's still 5e rules and stuff, but changes the way it works and whatnot. And I'm I doubt Wizards of the Coast is ever going to do that. That squarely feels in the realm of third party creators. But between the two, I'm what would you have planned to make players be a bigger bulk of your purchases in the first place? Most of your stuff is DM facing, if not all of it.
I mean, I am loath to even mention this, but there are DM-less games, role-playing games like Imperial Assault and Shadows over Brimstone, And if I were a loathsome Hasbro capitalist, I might be like, well, we can create our own virtual tabletop and then release an edition of D&D, which is DM-less, and then we can sell skins and
There's the
booster
board
packs
game Wrath of
and-
Ashardalon already.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I haven't played that, though. I have no idea if it's any good. But you could sell
it's not
subscription
any good.
services, all these things. Again, I don't think that's what they're going to do. That would require too much innovation and thought. It's much easier to just monetize the brand. But like that is a thing that I have feared that they would do from the very beginning, is that they'll try to create a version of D&D that is just a just like a poor board game imitation, and then aggressively use their brand position, because they are correct that D&D is like the Coca-Cola of the TTRPG world, to just drive purchases. So whatever they're doing is not that, but it appears to be similarly bad.
The full quote, and this is by Hasbro CEO, Wizards of the Coast CEO and President Cynthia Williams, is, quote, D&D has never been more popular, and we have really great fans and engagement, but the brand is really under-monetized. Yeah, I think Rob's right. I can't imagine a time or a place or a situation where someone says under-monetized and it means anything good for anyone.
Yeah. Except Hasbro investors, maybe.
Yeah. So the call went on to talk about how Wizards of the Coast, bought D&D Beyond, and they see that acquiring that company and, their new edition, 1D&D, will be a way to solve this problem, get more players, I guess, buying things. Let's see. Another quote is that the digital side of D&D will allow, quote, Wizards to unlock the type of recurring spending you see in digital games.
They want to be tabletop Fortnite. I don't, everybody wants to be Fortnite. Everyone wants to be FIFA, because they look at the kind of insane money that people spend on, skins or whatever, which is legitimately insane. And, but I don't know how you do that with Dungeons and Dragons. Like it does not really like translate, but I don't know. Maybe that's what you say to investors when you're on an investor call.
Yeah, like that was like really confusing for me too. Like again, I was like, how do you even fucking do that? And like, I said I had mixed feelings. I'm not against the idea of more like D&D inspired like entertainment media, because I like having things to watch. I like fantasy associated things. There are like a bunch of there are a bunch of D&D books, like actual novels. Like I started reading like the Dritch Stewart and like Homeland series when I like a bunch of years ago, and then I stopped reading it, not because I disliked it. I get distracted really easily, and it's hard for me to pick things back up sometimes.
The Cleric Quintet was one of my favorite books or series of books growing up. No, I love D&D novels. They're pulp fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love for them to like, if they were going to do movies and animations, to start pulling from that stuff, obviously like bring somebody into like, work on some of the more questionable parts of it. Yes. Or like Brimstone Angels, love the series, finished it from start to finish, got to go back and reread it, especially with like a new thing coming out. But which is why I was like mixed feelings, because hey, I'd be okay if they like did this correctly, this particular part. But the rest of it, I'm like,
no,
toys aren't for me.
I agree.
They don't have to be for me.
The
What,
thing
you
is,
don't
like,
want a dragon that transforms into a D20? Come on.
Okay, that one toy.
That's cool. I'm in the same boat, because Matt and I discussed this on a recent episode, but they haven't put out a video game with 5e rules. Like there used to be, like there was Neverwinter Nights, Neverwinter Nights 2, there was Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2. I loved all of those games. I played the shit out of them. Those were so much fun and like such a formative part of my gaming background. And they just sort of stopped doing that. Now they're just like, they came out with Dark Alliance, which everyone agrees was pretty bad. So like, if they want to make good things, if they want to make good movies, good TV shows, good video games, that's okay. That's fine. But like, when I hear under monetized, my suspicion is that that's not what they mean. That they're not going to invest money into like making good things. They're just going to like try to set up additional low effort and income streams. Again, every time we talk about this, I'm like, I could be wrong, but so far I haven't been.
Not likely, you
Yeah.
being wrong. As long as loath as I am to say it, because I
Yeah.
also want like again, TV shows, video games would eat it up, would love it. Some novelty toys, but yeah, they're not
Books,
going to do anything
comics,
super fun
like,
with that.
yeah, exactly.
Comics. Oh God.
Sure. To get on the points y'all are talking about, Chris Cooks, the CEO of Hasbro, who used to work in the Wizards of the Coast department,
Oh, right.
described, I'm quoting here from Chase Carter's article on Dicebreaker, to wit, Cox described a plan to shift D&D into a, quote, 4-quadrant brand similar to Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. I never thought of Lord of the Rings as a 4-quadrant brand, before. I don't exactly know what a 4-quadrant brand is.
I did buy,
but it does sound like more of what you're.
I did buy a Lord of the Rings T-shirt in a low-end department store in Scotland when I was there this summer, which is a really weird thing to find. But like maybe clothing is one of the quadrants. I so like, yeah, maybe just like merch is one of them. I know you can probably get D&D T-shirts, but yeah.
Maybe merch, games, which video games, TTRPG games, TV, and then books, like actual like novelizations. But
is a 4-quadrant brand like a brand that like is marketed to both like economic conservatives, social conservatives, liberal economy? Like it's all 4 of the little libertarian meme thing. I really don't know. It does seem.
Oh God!
like,
you know what Harry Potter has is it has theme parks.
What does it have?
What wouldn't a D&D theme park, that would be like a recursive LARP, right? Like you're going to a theme park that is about like a brand that's about like you're 3 steps removed. It's like that, the false self contains a trace of the true self meme. Anyway, that would be terrible. D&D theme park would almost certainly be a nightmare, but maybe that's one of the quadrants. Does Lord of the Rings have a theme park? I would go to Lord of the Rings theme park if they had one.
I don't think it does. I guess to get serious, to get at like the heart of what we're joking about is obviously TTRPGs are always going to be under-monetized because they're like games about like sharing and like kind of just hanging around and talking. Like that's all you do. Like you don't press buttons, you don't need merch. You don't even need like any materials besides paper and pencils, the things that are the most common household objects. Like you don't need anything. And like, that's the problem. That's what makes them great though. That's what makes them so popular. I guess one of the like sad things is like compared to, I guess, some different times in D&D, like the Dungeons and Dragons team, the actual people who create the stuff that does sell and does make a huge fucking profit is pretty small. Like there could be more designers, there could be more artists, like there could be more editors, like, they could make more stuff of the same type. But they don't. So it's just confusing to me. And it makes me a little sad.
Yeah, there are definitely ways to like expand with what they have and get more people into it, get more players and stuff. Like I write TTRPG supplements professionally for a living along with other stuff. And yeah, a lot of the stuff is like DM facing, but there are like I mentioned it before we were like I just mentioned it, like, DM-less adventures. They could do a lot more. Like I think one of the things that D&D, I think one of the things that would be useful for like maybe players is more like I know when I got started in D&D, which was 5e, I had no idea what it was. The only reason I got into it is because somebody at my college was doing they were doing their like senior thesis on tabletop role-playing games, and they asked me to play something. I can't even remember what the character sheet was. I don't remember anything about it besides I fell in love. And then I had to make my own first character, even going to Adventures League, and I was so out, like, if I hadn't had like a creative writing background, I might have been like way out of the loop making my backstory and all that other good stuff. And I'm like, you could make you could make stuff to help players with that. Like I feel like a lot of the like player's handbook, like sure you got background and stuff, but it's missing like a lot of the core stuff. Like the background stuff in there isn't gonna help me figure out, oh, my cleric is afraid of fucking zombies, so that like that's why she became a cleric, to be able to turn them away and whatnot, that kind of thing. Like there are other ways to monetize this and make it better for your bigger player base.
Well, you could also make it easier to be a DM. Like we talk about this all the time. This is why we have a podcast, because at the end of the day, there are DM tools, but they're not, like, it's hard. Like the upfront effort is difficult, and like, yeah, cynically, then those people will go buy more stuff. But like, if you have more DMs, you have more players, or if you make it easier for players to transition to being DMs, because right now you really need either just a true passion for learning it, or you need like a background. Like I think I played TTRPGs with Matt for probably 5 years before I tried DMing or GMing, and like 10 years before I was doing it regularly, which is fine. I started when I was 14. But like, you know, if you're just getting into it when you're in your 20s or 30s or wherever, it takes a long time to get comfortable with that. And I don't have, actually I do have specific examples. We talked about it plenty, but there's lots of things you could do, lots of things you could sell even, that would make it easier to be a DM. And again, if they were interested in expanding the hobby, again, this isn't exciting as a subscription service or selling, plushies or Funko Pops or something. But like that, again, from the boring perspective of how do we make a successful business that sells things that somebody wants, that's where I would start.
All right, the last thing I have to say about this, and I hate to always make the comparison between Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder, but it's like, if you're talking about player-focused books, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition in 8 years has only had 2. And like Pathfinder sells these like little player's guides to divine characters or like martial characters that have just tons of information about the world, about factions, organizations, about the gods or something like that. And, usually some player options as well. And like D&D stopped making those. But like if, I don't know, if the under monetizing, I guess to take a rose colored view of this, if this means like they're going to make the complete guide to experts or the complete guide to gnomes or an adventurer's handbook for Waterdeep or something like that, like that's not that bad. It doesn't sound like that at all, but those would be good. I feel like those would sell, and there would be things that players bought and DMs didn't.
People loved the last thing they did was what, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, which was, a mix, but like that was player focused sort of. They could do 100 of those, and I don't know why they don't, because those are always great. But yeah, Paizo does this.
Yeah, because what they have, Eberron, Ravnica. I don't know how well Ravnica's done. I like it. Like Faerun stuff. The damn it, the Curriculum of Chaos setting. Like, there's a bunch of places where they're like, hey, here's this, that, and the other, and it's like, doesn't get enough love. Besides, I mean, I guess Faerun. But yeah, lots of options there.
Okay, speaking of other news, people are like, the fact that there's a new edition and just like things happening in Dungeons and Dragons, I feel like is driving some people up the walls. So basically, as far as I can tell, an unfounded rumor or maybe founded on something real, I don't know, has started that Wizards of the Coast, when 1 D&D comes out, will no longer support the 5th edition systems reference document, and that maybe there will be a change or the end of the open game license. And this is the thing that, allows you to use part of the Dungeons & Dragons rules to publish your own thing, and all you have to do is kind of put a disclaimer in there and not use any Wizards trademarked property or any rules that they haven't released in the open game license. This reached such a fever pitch that a journalist, This is Christian Hoffer reached out to D&D, and they got an official statement from D&D, which is, "We will continue to support the thousands of creators making third-party D&D content with the release of One D&D in 2024. While it is certain our open game license will continue to evolve, just as it has since its inception, we're too early in the development of One D&D to give more specifics on the OGL or the system reference document at this time." VJ, you make part of your living publishing under these things. What are your thoughts with all this going on?
So first, I want to acknowledge. So like, yeah, I need to. I know about the OGL, the SRD, all of it, because yeah, I do make a lot. I like, well, most of the stuff I get paid for, most of my income comes from DM's Guild, like residuals, but I do work with other companies, MCDM, all that kind of stuff. So I need to know what I'm like allowed to use, or be like, hey, can we replace this with something else that's along this line? Like, can't use Dragon Breath or whatever. But also on like so I know like the actual in-text document, but on the legal side, I was kind of like, I don't really understand like what this is. So like the good little academic I am, I went and like listened to a bunch of people talking about it, some people that I trust. Like I listened to like multiple videos by Sly Flourish, who's been doing stuff like this for years, and was listening to the conversation, like, okay, that makes sense. So like so my opinion on it has formed from listening to that, and pretty much what the gist of it is.
So what you're saying is you are a lawyer and you are our attorney.
This constitutes legal advice. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. This constitutes legal advice. Yes. Thank you. So
just a joke.
There's a couple of things here that like after listening to Sly Flourish that I'm like, I don't know what you mean by that, because like has the OGL, like, I am new to 5e. I mean, I am new to D&D, 5e specifically, and I know the OGL's been out since like 4th edition.
Third edition.
Third edition. Has it actually like substantially changed since then? Besides like maybe like they gave us some like the 5e aboleth stats, like that kind of thing. Like, has the legal information of it changed anything? Because my understanding is that it hasn't. So how has it evolved besides like, oh, we're adding in these stat blocks and these abilities and whatnot? So like I'm like, how are you evolving in what way? Like, are you adding more stuff to it, kind of evolving, or like what? Like I need them to define evolving for me before I can be like, okay, that makes sense. And then the like my biggest thing here is like, even if there's not even if there's not a updated OGL that has mechanics and stuff for One D&D or whatever the next iteration is actually going to be called, like the one that exists right now is always going to exist. They can't take it back unless they go to court and try to say, well, our license that we made, which might
you
backfire
can still
on them.
publish third edition stuff on the third edition open gaming license and SRD, right? It's out there, right?
Exactly.
And
like,
it's evolved in that like fourth editions was like less expansive, third editions maybe a little bit more than 5e, but yeah, so it has evolved over time, but these are kind of minor changes.
Yeah, and then the other bit, which is kind of interesting to me, I was listening to it, I was like, oh, that's kind of wild. Like, you know how like you can't legally trademark or copyright, whichever the phrase is, game mechanics? And so there was this thing been going around like, why, like, you could probably technically get away with like grabbing it, but it depends on if Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, is gonna challenge you for it, and who has the money to go up against that. Obviously not smaller creators, maybe like Monty Cook Games, Kobold Press, maybe even MCDM and Ghostfire Gaming might be making their way up there to be a big enough company to like challenge that, and like then it really doesn't matter if there's an OGL, because
Listen,
it's the
I'll
game
tell
designer's paradox. Once you're big enough to challenge Wizards of the Coast, you're smart enough to design better mechanics anyway.
Right. I will say that as Wizards, whether it's laziness or disinterest or whatever, like they're no Metallica. I say this as somebody who runs a podcast with a trademark infringement in the name. They could absolutely sue a lot of people that they do not. So yeah, I don't know. You can. One wonders if people can just continue to sort of like ride this line as long as they're not getting too big. I also like the other thing is, again, speaking of DM's Guild, like it would be really weird for them to do this because they make a bunch of free money off of people like writing supplements. Like it literally, like they do nothing. Like again, this is the dream of every capitalist, is just like, people pay you for
pure
the use
rent.
yeah, it's just rent extraction. They do nothing to maintain it. Like I don't know why they would get rid of that income stream. It's probably not a ton, but again, that is zero effort, free money, and then the more the brand grows, the more of it they make. It would be really bizarre to get rid of the OGL. I can't see the benefit in it. However, I have never credited business people with an overabundance of intelligence, so who knows?
I guess now that we're talking about the DMs Guild, I think another thing, so like they're like, oh, we're gonna continue to support our third party like creators and whatnot. That could just mean the DMs Guild people. Like we're third party creators, but so is Cobalt Press and all of them, and they could decide to do something really wonky and like shitty and be like, oh, they're making all this money on Kickstarters, that should be our stuff, and like just shut them down there. But there's no evidence that is definitely the case, although the statement they put out didn't really give us any hard answers, so there's no evidence that it's not the case. I think it's just like a kind of wait and see, and like as far as I'm aware, the 5th edition OGL, the 3rd edition OGL, 4th edition, they came out like at least a year or two, if not more, after the actual like edition came out, so we might not know one way or the other for a few years, which would be in line with the previous ones, right? So like I'm not saying like I don't know the ins and outs of how this got started. Like it could be legit and they know something we don't. It could just be rumors. Like I'm not gonna decide one way or the other than that, since that's not really the biggest issue here. It's like talking about what's happening. But like I think if people are worried, to prepare, like see if you can't start spreading out to different things if possible monetarily, figuring out what can happen with that. But we don't know until we know.
My read on the statement was it's basically corporate nonsense talk, in that like we actually haven't made a plan one way or the other, or if we have made a plan, we haven't solidified or got it approved, or we just don't know what we're going to do. So we're going to say whatever we can to make sure that everyone stops freaking out. Yeah, everyone just calms down, right? Well, speaking of the DMs Guild, you've had a lot of success publishing on the DMs Guild, and one of, I think, my favorite creations of yours, VJ, is an elf and an orc had a little baby, a guide to, let me see if I can get the subtitle right, a guide to parentage and upbringing.
Yeah, exactly.
And it is, let me see if I can give a good introduction to it. It is a great set of rules for making a character that doesn't, that one, gets rid of some of the aspects that a lot of people have been complaining about choosing your, quote, race in D&D, the ability score improvements. This came out a long time before Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, by the way, and allows you to have a ton more flexibility, options, flavor in choosing your parentage and how your character has grown up. And you have 3 volumes of this, basically cover now anything you could and everything you could possibly imagine an adventurer could be in Dungeons and Dragons.
It's very thorough.
Yeah, so like great, like hit the nail on the head describing it. Excellent explanation. And just to give everybody a look, like a couple of quick stats about like the overall series before we dive into the third one.
Yeah.
And just general things. So first off, Volume 3 has 44 different parentages, and I think over 15 new upbringings. So but Volume 3 from Aboleth to Zvart, and we have the Kinder in there. And for anybody that doesn't know what a Zvart is, it's those little small blue humanoids. They got like orange eyes, receding hairlines, guys. And like the overall series has all of the official races, including Grung and Tortle. Anything you could find in on D&D Beyond's race section, like that Wizards of the Coast says is theirs, it's in there. There's roughly 111 parentages across all 3. We say roughly because like there's some repeats like abyssal and infernal parentages, because we did add like parentage lines for demons, devils, just general fiends across the various books as we were working on it. And we also like took inspiration from other products on the DM's Guild, of course checking in with the actual authors before like grabbing it and using it and mentioning them in the products as well. So there's a Guide to Social Acceptance Volume 1, Birds of Paradise, which is how we got a lot more Aarakocra and Kinku, and then Monstrous Races 1 and 2, which is how we made a bunch of the which is how we got some of the base and inspiration from for like Iron Guardians, so those kind of parentages and whatnot. And then the last thing, it's like this isn't just something that we've done in this isn't just something that we've done for the DM's Guild stuff. It's in our game, Those Who Wander. It's also in our MCDM's Arcadia issue 2, Beings from Beyond the Horizon, which is something myself and another creator, Dale Kingsmill, worked on. Playing Possum, a collection of 4 animal folk origins. And then finally, there's a new product coming out next year at some point called Drit's Travelogue of Everything Volume 2, and the rules are in there as well. Like, we've gotten a chance to like go everywhere with this, and it's been a great time.
There's a lot to like about this, and I'm gonna be effusive because I really like it, and I'm referencing Volume 1 because that was what I was reading when I was preparing for this, so there may have been updates, but there's a lot that I it's a lot that I love, and I want to talk about some specifics, but possibly my favorite part, and you did such a good job of explicating something that I sometimes have trouble putting into words in your forward here, and just like the last paragraph, and this is basically on bioessentialism, but this is what you write. While we all know that Dungeons and Dragons is a fantasy game, it doesn't make sense that characters that are played by and behave like real people wouldn't also be influenced by their biology and their environment just as real people are. To us, verisimilitude is an important part of the game, and bioessentialism breaks it. We hope this supplement helps your table explore realism without the racism of the real world interfering. This is so spot on for me because in the conversation around species and race and ancestry and D&D, often the position that there's a problem with the way that races are handled is categorized as, I don't know, woke nonsense. And not that there's anything wrong with being woke, but it's also wrong. It's also like, that's not how things work. And so like, when I go back to older editions, or when I look and I'm like, why are there only half orcs and half elves? Like, where are my half dwarves? Where are my half gnomes? Like, why is the line drawn there? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And it does like break my immersion in the game. And, this is right and cool for like a lot of reasons, but that, I think, you did such a good job of encapsulating in that paragraph. So I really appreciate how you phrased that and how precise it was.
Yeah, I had the like same issues with you when I was reading it. The like 5e races and like coming like besides like the biosense, it's like I don't need everything to be 1-to-1. Like, I don't need D&D to have like take the D&D economy, right? Non-existent. And I'm about to say I don't need a functioning economy while I am a guy who's trying to make a somewhat functioning economy. But like, I don't need it to function like our actual economy does, but I need like something that makes sense for me. And it's like, we don't need to go back to like the race breeding charts from previous editions or anything, but I need something that makes sense. Like, cause like if there's half elves, half human, like if in the base game there's half elves and half orcs, and according to Ed Greenwood and like implied by Keith Baker, there are like half parentages in Faerun and Eberron. Like, why aren't there stats for it? And then also, why isn't there some sort of separation between like the example I always give people when they ask me like, why did you even do this? Like, what's the problem here? Like, if I am a half orc and I've been raised in the life of luxury and I've never had to lift a single finger and I decide, oh, you know what? I'm going to play a fighter. And then my other friend who's playing a gnome who's been a coal miner their entire fucking life before they started adventuring plays a gnome. I'm the one with the inherent bonus to strength with my like ASIs tied to that, and not this motherfucker who's been doing hard labor their entire life before they started like coming up to play with me. And I was like, that's ridiculous. This makes no sense. It's terrible.
And ferocity and savage attack, and half orc is the worst for this. Like, it doesn't. a perfect example of why this doesn't make any sense. You could be a dandy, a nobleman's, half-orc daughter, and you still are you just really good at killing people for some reason. It defies explanation.
Yeah, and like, so I want to give space to say that like like I can come up with a backstory for why that makes sense for a specific orc. Like, oh yes, I'm a nobleman's daughter. However, my father had me like train with these like brutal fighters, so I know how to do this and I know how to do that as well. Like, I'm not like every other girl. But that doesn't work for like that doesn't make sense for every single orc backstory. Like, you take the noble background and are all of them supposed to have done that? Not all of them are going to have done that or even have access to that, because noble can go from, oh, I'm a princess, to, oh, I'm the third son from a small like noble house. Like, we can't afford that shit. And so like, a big part of this was very much like, while they're like, half of it was very much like, hey, there's some racist fucked up shit in like how they handle race in 5e. The other part was like from a love of like how the 5e races or species, as they're maybe moving towards, interact with the world in a realistic fashion. And they weren't doing that before, and it was like, we can fix this, and it's not the hardest thing to do, or even the hardest thing for like players to use, or DMs for that matter.
It's a win-win. Yeah.
Just as an example, using just the first edition of An Elf and Orc Had a Little Baby, I rolled up a half Warforge, half Aasimar Paladin flame set in the world of Eberron. I was like, oh, this backstory comes together perfectly. What if, a Warforge creator made a pact with, some celestial Codal, and it's like, I'm going to create the perfect paladin of the Silver Flame that's going to restore the church to its goodness. And you can have a human Aasimar in the base game, but you can't have a Warforge one, but now you can. And it feels so cool.
Exactly. And okay, just to touch on the bioessentialism and racist part of things.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so for anybody that's listening who doesn't know what bioessentialism is, it's like essentially the belief that our like various like physical like things that make us our person are like things that we are like inherently going to have or born with, or like the idea that like, so real world example, all like black people are super athletic, or all Asian people are like really intelligent. And while some people might be thinking, oh, but those are positive stereotypes, also very harmful, and can be very harmful. Black people can be very harmful for Asian people, especially since it's not like, it can disproportionately be applied to different ethnicities within those different like racial groups. But yeah, that's the gist of it. And like with the example I gave just now, the bioessentialism is in like the ASI, and with you mentioning savage attacker and whatnot, like there's our backgrounds, the way our characters have lived their lives are actually what are going to determine whether or not where our like ability score improvements come from, where are like things like tool proficiencies, languages, combat, and some magical related abilities. Like, yeah, there are some like inherent like inherently magical things. Like, to use an example, if you take the high elf, you learn a cantrip, you learn a wizard cantrip, and if you take the drow, you learn darkness, fairy fire, that kind of thing. And I know that some of them are like wizards. I think that all of those are things wizards can cast. But when we were like looking at the the difference between those two, it was like, okay, you learn this at the top, versus as you grow as a stronger player, you unlock this magic. So it was like, okay, this feels like the drow magic feels like it's something internal to you, like your parentage has inherent magical abilities, versus, well, the cantrip you get as a high elf just sounds like, I don't know, all high elves learn like these cantrips when they're little kids. So that cantrip went in an upbringing, but drow and other parentages like get inherent magic that like just scales with them. So like it can be kind of a toss up for things like that. But we like, Adam reached out to me, like I got in this space doing reviews, and then we started having conversations about race, and I was like, oh, I have a like academic background in that and around creative writing. I was like, I can talk about this. I know what I'm talking about. Because I'm a firm believer of like, it's fine to say, I don't know enough about the topic to comment on it, so I'm just not going to, besides asking questions. And then I was talking about that.
I
Adam
do not
reached
know
out.
what that's like. Sorry.
Or if I like hop in a conversation where I think I know something, but I don't, it's like, you know what? You're right. I was wrong. But what about this? And then ask more questions. And then, you know. But Adam asked me to join the project, and I was super stoked and excited about it. And then, like, I already knew there were, like, issues of, like, the way orcs and half-orcs were described in the game, using a lot of language, a racist language that is associated in the modern context with indigenous people, black people. And just to get this out of the way, yes, the way orcs are described has also been used for the Mongols, for Vikings, all that. But again, modern context, which if somebody wants to point to me where like being a savage, raping and pillaging and everything is being applied to like the descendants of these people in a way that's contributing to systemic oppression, I will more than happily add them into that conversation, because it's not any better if it's like white people or anything like that. It's still bad. The
truly impressive thing about orcs is that the way they've been described somehow manages to be racist to so many different groups of people at once. It truly is an accomplishment.
And like it's bad all around. Like even if somebody's like, well, Viking, okay, or like Norse people, I'm like, okay, but are they being oppressed for it? Is it hurting? Is it actually hurting them as a people? And if it is, why are you okay with more people being hurt in this context? I have never explicitly said that orcs equal black people, except for like, I love playing orcs and half-orcs. I feel a particular kinship to them purposely because of the way like the racist stereotypes that have been used to them, and I wanted to fix how people view them, because I could see those stereotypes that are like used on me as a black guy and just my, you know, race in general. And so now I'm like, orcs are ours, but obviously anybody can play them. And like whenever I play an orc or a half orc, I'm very clearly coding them as a black person. Like I'm playing a half orc on Saturdays for a stream game, and like he's got dreadlocks. I'm like, yes, my family of orcs are black people. I don't know about every other orc in the setting, but these ones are. But like orcs are not black people, like not in a one-to-one, but in the way that you can when you add a bunch of stereotypes on things. And there's a lot of stuff that actually goes into like when orcs had the negative modifier to intelligence plus the bonus to strength, you get the big, strong, dumb brute stereotype that you have with like a lot of black masculine folks. And also the like raping and pillaging thing, which the raping also applies to black people, but the raping and pillaging also applies to like is used against various indigenous people. Like that's what we say when we're like, hey, orcs are like acting as kind of a stand-in for some people of color. Not that we see those people as actual rapists, dumb, brutish savages kind of thing, but hey, this gets used on us like this, and you're using it here too. So you see what we're saying. And it was an excellent chance to remove like the racist ASI and like other elements, and to rewrite the lore. Like we had to do like new sections, like, oh, like, you know, orc parentage and then mixed orcs to be like, oh, hey, here's what their lives are like. Here's like how they interact with the general public. And it was a really fun time to be able to like marry the things that I like the most, removing bigotry from the stuff that I play, because I don't want to deal with that. Like I also want to dive into a fantasy setting. I don't want to have to deal with this bullshit that I deal with every day. I want escapism, but also like making things make sense in the world, but not making it so overwhelming that it's like nobody's ever going to use the rules.
The lore sections in this book are really great. As a dungeon master, right? Not only do you have a lore section about each of these different parentages, but you have a lore section about people who have mixed ancestry of one of those parentages. So if you're like rolling up, for me, if I'm rolling up an NPC that's a Kinku or someone who has mixed Kalashtar or Kalashtar parentage in an Eberron game, right? I can flip to that thing and get a few little notes for my inspiration in addition to my mechanics.
Exactly.
We haven't even mentioned the mechanics, and actually, like, there's a lot. I love the lore and the description, and the way that you've approached this is so well written and interesting. But I actually like really want to praise the mechanical part of this as well, because I'm a mechanics nerd, and I was like, really, it makes a lot of sense to me. It works way better than the inherent mechanics in 5e. And very simply, I don't know how much you've changed this in recent editions, but you get a certain number of points based on your parentage, and you can choose traits worth X amount of points and sort of put that together and make a a package of traits and inherent abilities for your adventurer, and it works really well. It's really easy to put together. You can decide. It makes it really great to make NPCs or player characters. You did a really good job of in my opinion, of balancing everything and also making it like very interesting and appealing to sort of put this together. I love fiddling with character creation like this, and this is a lot of fun.
Yeah. So on the note of like if we've changed things, we actually have like well first there have been some like textual changes, some mechanical changes because we didn't have a sensitivity reader for the first one, which was a mistake on our part. And had like a couple of like mixed individuals point that out to us. And then when we did the second volume, we hired somebody not only to do, sensitivity reading for the second volume, but to go back and do it for the first one too. And then
I'm looking at one that has a sensitivity reader listed. So maybe I have the updated version.
It's updated. Like we specifically went back. So everything across the board should be like, for the most part, like pretty clean together. There are like a couple of people pointing like, oh, like people like for every volume people have been like, hey, can you clarify this? And we've had to go and like make some small tweaks, or like we forgot like how if we said, oh, this is worth 3 points in a previous one, and then we said 5 points here, like we go back and change that and let people know like, hey, this has been errata, so but for the most part everything is pretty much uniform across the board. Like that's another thing that I really liked about doing this. It was like, yeah, once if we decided that something should change or whatnot because of shifting mechanics, we just go back and correct it for everything previously so that everybody has updated stuff. So what you're looking at is like pretty much same thing for third edition for the third volume, save for like maybe a thing or two that we might go back and like tweak a little bit. But yeah, no, I really love the mechanics as well because it's and like I said, you get like right now you get 16 points between two parentages, and assuming your like DM is okay with it, it doesn't even have to just be between two parentages. Like in the first volume, there's an example of like, hey, so say you have your PC, right, and then you have their parents and your grandparents on both sides, and there's like a breakdown. Like say you have like Leonin parents for your grandparents on your dad's side, but then your like full Leonin, and then like your mom's I don't know, part Owlin, part Turtle, right? Because and then you get to you and you're like, hey, you can choose traits from your grandparents on either side, your parents on either side, as long as the DM doesn't feel like that's too much for you to be doing. Doesn't break anything. We used a free resource for anybody that wants to try doing this themselves, Detect Greater Balance. Just type it into Google and it pops up. They did a lot of the like already mechanical things for us, and we're like, okay, here's how we apply this to this to this to this, and like explicitly call it out, and they're like, oh hey, we use this as well, like excellent work, great person, like not like ripping off any other stuff, but like, oh hey, this is how the math plays out for the most part. And so it makes for really awesome like generational characters that like if to use my half orc Tazriel that I play on Saturdays on a stream, he's part half orc, part tiefling, but I could have also had like a little bit of like Aasimar in there if I was like, yeah, my great grandfather was an Aasimar, and like I might not look the way people think an Aasimar should look. Your characters know one way to look like that, but could still have that like heritage. Like I could still have like the healing hand things in there, and it's just, it makes for really fun like backstory stuff, and also for people that just like planning out their entire like family tree for their characters. Be like, listen, if you want to go that deep, you can take stuff from everywhere. Just check in with your DM first. And that's also the case for the upbringings as well. It's not just the parentages, because in like multi-generational mixed race ethnic houses, there's going to be different like skills and values that are being like told to you in various ways, and it's like, so why shouldn't you also be able to like grab different things from your upbringings that can help you out in that way as well? Like it just makes sense. Like I'm from a monoracial, mono-ethnic house, so this is just like me assuming things and listening to my friends that aren't, but I like it's just and while I haven't actually used the upbringing in like two different family settings, because like I've had some very clear thoughts on what my character should be, and one upbringing did that. If you don't have that, or you're like, hey, I want to mix and match this, the points are there. A whole walkthrough of how to use it in every book so that you understand what's happening. And you don't have to buy any of the previous books to use the current books. Like, completely can be standalone things. Don't have to worry about any of that. But just wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to make as many choices as they wanted.
One of the things I really like about this is it's absolutely feels, balanced with if you had players who were just, let's say, using the standard stuff from the player's handbook, right? There's no reason that if you had, let's say, a new player who just wanted to be a variant human straight from the player's handbooks, that this wouldn't fit in with that, right? One of the fun things is like you've separated a lot of the as you mentioned before, the ability score increases are part of your upbringing section, which could be things like common defense upbringing or a consular upbringing, a draconic upbringing, right? Forest upbringing. I wanted to get your thoughts, VJ, because it seems like 1D&D, the playtest documents we've seen so far, I'm talking specifically about the first one, the character origins, in some ways are kind of moving towards this, but maybe dropping the balls in other spots. So background in the 1D&D playtest looks a lot more like your upbringing than it did look like background in 5th edition.
So before I dive into that, I do want to add one thing. So
oh yeah, sure.
There are a couple of parentages, the human, the ogre, and the third one that do have ASIs. Like for humans, unfortunately, like there's only so much a human gets, and we're like,
right.
We can't just like you're supposed to have a certain number of points around that, and the human just did not have that without some of their ASI. So like we had to concede on that for game balance. And then for other places, it's like I'm okay with ASI if you're telling me it's magic. If you're saying that a god has magically imbued, like for the or it's the hill giant, I'm like hardy constitution. I can totally believe a hill giant who's like lore, they eat a bunch of stuff, they get that mouth of Granada or whatever, has a hardy constitution, like a mystical one that gives them a bonus to con. Back on the note of the 1D&D backgrounds, yeah, it does definitely look like they're moving more towards that like upbringing and stuff, which in general I like. I'm glad for them to do it. Execution wise, I'm not super happy with all of them. Like there's still like gladiator, the inherent language being orcish, and I'm like, why like that feels kind of like, it feels like they're like separating they're trying to step away from the stereotypes but then just putting it back in there. Like why is the like brutal warrior thing orcish? Like why did like I'm questioning the reasonings behind it. And again, I never assign malicious intent to any of these creators unless they give me an actual reason to, like something that I can point to be like, yeah, here's their history of being like blatantly racist, because like we all have our like blinders, there's things we're not educated on, and also intent doesn't matter in the context of impact. So like I don't think they did it on purpose, but I do think it's like indicative of them like seeing like, oh, there's a problem, and then not doing enough research or bringing the right people to actually point out how to fix it correctly. So again, I'm happy with a lot of the backgrounds questioning like, why'd you use this language over this language? Why couldn't you do something else with language? I think it's going in the general right direction. They just really need different people handling that.
The 1D&D playtest, listen, I don't think I'll say it. It seems like someone at Wizards of the Coast read and loved an elf and an orc had a little baby without fully having the time or space to process all of the things that needed to go into it. And we're like, oh, perfect. Well, in 5 minutes, I'll just kind of copy some of this background ideas some of these upbringing ideas to backgrounds. And then, several layers of editors and writers went through it and it came out a little wonky.
Listen, if that's actually like what happened, I've said this multiple times on my TikTok, all of it. Like, if Wizards of the Coast wants to take these mechanics, one, they can legally, even though like apparently their policy is like they'll contact you, they'll pay you some money for it, whatever. Like, just take it, please. You don't even have to hire me to like help you implement it. Just follow the rules. Hire our sensitivity reader. Hire legal kimchi. Like, just take it, please. Enough of this.
I mean, this is meant as praise and a compliment, but this is similar to how Pathfinder's second edition approaches their ancestries. Like they share a lot of, I've been using this phrase a lot, I should probably stop, but whatever. Shares a lot of the same DNA. That's because I think those are generally like mechanically, again, it's a good way to mechanically break down these packages and also avoid being like unpleasantly racist. But it does feel like 5e like read that, read this, read other things, and then kind of got halfway there, but like missed the point. I hope that the end product for 1D&D is a little bit better. I don't ultimately care a ton about whether or not they call it species or not, but what I do care about is like removing all those weird vestiges of just like the things that attaching to certain like languages and behaviors to certain packages of it. Just I don't know why they didn't go all the way on that. It seems very weird. I would love to know what they are thinking because it defies explanation.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know there's been like a whole thing about the species conversation, and I don't particularly like the word because it just makes my like talking about why I'm not okay with this stuff harder. Like people were already saying, well, they're different species, it's fine for them to have this, and like I'm seeing it happening under people's YouTube videos and TikToks. And I'm like, see, you just made our stuff harder. So I don't like the word for that. But I could live with species as much as I don't like it. And as much as like, there's like, you know, speciesism and a lot of other like fucked up things tied to it. If they fix the actual in text issue, like just calling a different name doesn't fix everything else underneath it. But yeah, I like to be a fly on the wall, to literally, or to be like, or to be able to reach out and be like, hey, I want to interview you for this podcast. Will you give me the truth? The whole lowdown, no corporate jargon. Just tell me what is going on. And I know they never will. I know even if I was like the most famous podcaster in the fucking world, they would never do that. But it's all I want. I just like, I want to understand the thought process behind everything they're doing and the things they're not doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is that in addition or maybe above the actual word they use to describe ancestry, parentage, heritage, you know, species of a character, it's the stuff kind of below and beside it, right? What your background says, what it says about the lore of each selection, what it says about your languages and tools, and, you know, do gnomes still get a tool proficiency? Okay, well, is that really how we want to go? Yeah, it's all these like things alongside. What would be your but speaking about the word, what do you have a preference for the word? Is it parentage? Is it heritage? Is it ancestry?
I mean, my top word is parentage because that's what we've been using. But I also want to like open up and be honest. Like I have seen some people like people have been suggesting ancestry, lineage, because they've also already used lineage before, and people have been pointing out like, hey, ancestry, lineage, heritage, parentage, even do have like, you know, have been used by like white supremacists, neo-Nazis, all of them in various places, even folk. And so there's a lot of like issues around each of them, some that have like a lot bigger like we know about these issues kind of thing than some of these other words. So it's probably just going to be damage reduction. Like some people have offered up kin, and I know like some people are fine with that. Others feel like it's too fantasy or too weird of a word. I'd be fine with kin even. Like
I like that. That's different. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be fine. Like if somebody's like, hey, parentage also has that like white supremacist like baggage, even if it's like lesser known. Like I'm always open to being told like, hey, this exists too. I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk more about it. Like, is it a known issue? How big is it? Like, how prevalent is it? Is it what's too big? What's small enough to decide, hey, we probably shouldn't also use this word if species is a problem because it has this big connotation with it. But yeah, like, if not parentage, I'm also totally fine with kin based on that.
I think my vote is for ancestry only because if it's ancestry, then I can tell my new players creating your character is as easy as ABC. Ancestry, background, class, and be really cheesy about it.
That's a good one, though.
That's good. That's good.
So this book has, like we said, a ton to recommend it. What about for dungeon masters? What about for people like our listeners and like yourself who are sitting there trying to come up with cool NPCs, monsters, allies, sidekicks? Any recommendations for using this book or set of books, series of books, as a dungeon master?
Yeah, actually, definitely. So one you mentioned, we mentioned at the top of this, I'm a pro GM. There's only like one homebrew campaign that I'm technically running, and even then it's set in Exandria, and then the rest are like all of them are Forgotten Realms and its various iterations. And I love the world to feel really lived in, and I love for there to be a variety of people, like gender, sexuality, parentage. And so part of the things that I do to prep for like this is like I'm a big Google spreadsheet person, especially with all the formulas. So I'll go in and like have all of the parentages and like let the do the random between thing to tell me which two numbers that I should mash them up together. And then I can go in and be like, okay, so if they wind up going with the party or they need a stat block, they have these abilities in here for them. And then even if you don't want to do any of the abilities, or if you do, if you want to use them and then just be like, oh, here's how they would interact with the world because they're, mixed parentage. Using a random number generator with all the things that we have makes it really easy to make unique and like visually different than what a lot of people might associate with like standard things. Like when I described like, oh yeah, you see like somebody who appears to have Aarakocra and Warforged ancestry. You see kind of metallic feathering, vines, and like wooden parts. Like I can already tell that my players are like, that is so fucking cool, right? And then like, and those are just like the random NPCs you see walking around. And then back to like, oh, if you actually need an NPC and like a small stat block for them, you have all these options to like give them all these different abilities. And if you want to like have them have mixed and like multiple like generational stuff in there, again, a random generator, if you don't want to like go through all of them and be like, hey, I think I want this, like, if you just want to put something random together for their parentage and their upbringing, like just like I said, a random generator is perfect for that. If you have like, actually, I want to read through all of these and see what fits for this NPC, you can do that too. Like it's been really useful and helpful for me. And on the note of like actual monsters, so I haven't done this yet, but I have been thinking about it because, like I said, there are a number of parentages in here that are are D&D monsters, like the hill giants, the like flesh, iron, and stone guardians. Like you can go in and say, oh, this is like I know so I know Warforged are technically humanoid, and like iron, stone, flesh golems are constructs and whatnot, but we also have various different like 5e races and species now that aren't just all humanoid. So it makes perfect sense if you want to say, oh, I have a flesh golem that also that's partially a construct, but also has some infernal heritage, so can do hellish rebuke kind of thing. Like it's easy to like go in and grab traits from the various parentages and the upbringings and just to spice up a stat block. Using a specific example from volume 3, we have the Azer, which has like an ability that allows them to like kind of do like a flame body, which if you get too close to it, you take like, a d6 of fire damage, and it lasts for X amount of minutes, and you can only do it you can only like activate that either once per long rest or a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. It's one of the two. You can like mechanically grab that and give it to, I don't know, a shambling mound. Like there is a shambling mound parentage in this as well. So like it'd be unique, it'd be different. Who's expecting the literal plant, which I think might have like vulnerability to fire on a standard basis, to have a flaming, like a flame aura or something.
That's just a shambling mound that engulfed an Azer 20 years ago, and it's been shooting flames out ever since. That's such a great idea for monsters. I would love to be able to just like reading through this book, I'm like, oh, I've got to throw together an elemental swarm of insects or a tribe of, a group of kobolds that are associated with wyverns and all use poison and have poisonous tails or something like that. It's just a really great mix and match to freshen up your world, your monsters, your NPCs, your allies, your sidekicks.
I do want to say, I think this might be like our last like big major volume. Like if there are more like races, species that come out, like we'll update it or whatnot.
The trilogy is complete.
Yeah, the trilogy is complete, but it's me and Adam's love child, and like I bring this everywhere. Like listen, if another company lets me do it, I will do it. MCDMs let me do it.
Yeah, great article. Check out the most recent edition of Arcadia, or last month's Arcadia volume 12.
It should be issue 22, I think. It
22.
should be arcade issue 22, yeah. But I'm running Tyranny of Dragons for some players with a lot of like add-ins to it. And one of them mentioned that like little like winged cat that can like like detect poison. Yeah, I can't remember the name. But yeah, like it's from I don't even know what it's from. But one of the players was like, "Man, I really want to play like a cat specifically,
Tressum.
not yes, the Tressum, not a tabaxi, but a cat." And I was just like, what if there was like a little splat book, like nothing major, that had all of the 5e beasts in it and just kind of tweaked it a little bit like, hey, let's just assume you've been awakened. Here you get. Let's assume these kind of things.
Are you going to publish an owl and a bear had a little baby? Had a little monster?
There's a
Maybe.
I remember now. There's a winged cat in Waterdeep Dragon Heist named Slobber Chops. I love that cat. He was a big hit with my players both of the times I ran it. Just a big grumpy winged cat. The Tressum. That's right. Great monster, beast, whatever. Loved him. Slobber Chops.
Yeah, exactly. So like beasts, aberrations, since a lot of them are like, which I think we might have an owlbear and a belay. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Bulette.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I was like,
I don't know if that's right.
I was like, I feel like that's not right, but it's fine. In there somewhere, I think we might, although I'm probably wrong. We like, there's over 111. I don't remember all of them, but yeah, like just like adding that little in for people that are like, oh, I want to play like an actual like this is what I want to do. I want to be a cat. I want to be an actual owlbear. I don't want any of this other stuff.
Well, if an owl and a bear had a little monster comes out, we would love to have you back, and love to have you back on the podcast to talk about any old damn thing. Other than an elf and orc had a little baby, volume 3, is there anything else that you're working on that you want to highlight or plug for the show?
Yeah, okay. So is there anything that I'm working on that's out? Nothing that I'm currently working on has been published yet, but I will say it anyway. There's Drit's Travelogue of Everything, Volume 2. Volume 1 did really good on the DM's Guild. I did some new parentages for that. The Virtus, which is a plant person, and then what was the other one that I did? The Robo, which is like the Warforged, but it was more inspired by Detective Inspector Gadget than like the Warforged kind of thing. So like a little bit more less existential crisis. What is my life? And more like, okay, cool, I'm here.
Go Gadget 10-foot pole. Go Gadget caltrops. Go Gadget bullseye lantern.
Yeah, exactly. There were some like kind of funny names in there, but didn't really fit the like fantasy themes of things, so they've been like changed. But like there was one that was like kicking into high gear or something, or robo arms. That was the actual like framework of it is still there, but like if anybody plays it, just remember they did have like funny names, so if you decide to rename them for your own thing, perfectly in line with the creator's vision or whatnot. And then there are a couple of third-party things. I have a new article that I'm working on for MCDM's Arcadia, which is about damn it, how have I forgotten this? A black market that has like multiple versions of it across the plains.
Ooh.
I'm doing a monster design and an adventure design for the Vineyard. It's a project by It's Friday, who is one of, if not the top professional DM over on Start Playing That Games. And then I am a designer and project manager for Unnamed Space Project. And we weren't super happy with Spelljammer, so we're just doing some more stuff and making it more like a little bit more sci-fi than what it actually is. Actually making alien species, where I think that word, kind of actually belongs to, because they're, completely separate things, and just filling in like a couple of like niches there. And all of that stuff's, primed to come out in 2023 at some point, like either on Kickstarter or just out for you to buy on the DM's Guild.
Hell yeah. Those, especially for me, Unnamed Space Project sound really awesome. I can't wait.
We will definitely have you back to talk about the Unnamed Space Project. That's very much up our alley. So let us know when that comes out.
And if you want to follow VJ, link in the show notes.
VJ, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. This was a real blast. You are welcome anytime. Like Matt said, we'll have places to follow VJ in the show notes. Stay healthy, everybody. Stay safe and keep rolling them dice.
better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong.